Hello and welcome to In Depth. I'm Tina Jha. On 27th March 2019, India successfully tested a state-of-the-art missile technology by shooting down a satellite parked at low Earth orbit. The anti-satellite test placed the country in an elite club of countries with such a capability. But in the days following India's ASAT test, American space agency NASA has come up with sharp criticism, saying the debris created due to shooting down of the satellite has increased the risk to the International Space Station. NASA says it has identified at least 400 pieces from the wreck and at least 60 have got near the International Space Station, posing a potential threat of collision. Indian space scientists have rubbished the NASA assertion on various counts. Today in In-Depth, we analyze the NASA claims on India's ASAT test and find out how valid are its concerns about the dangers on space debris. We'll also look at the various treaties that govern space and the International Space Station. A day after India successfully carried out its ASAT test, acting US Defense Secretary warned that the event could create a mess in space. Almost a week later, NASA raised concern over claims that the debris could pose a threat to the International Space Station, stationed at an altitude between 330 and 435 kilometers in low Earth orbit. The successful test of India's space program Mission Shakti put India in an elite club of the United States, Russia and China in owning and using anti-satellite technology. On 27th March, the ASAT weapon was launched from the DRDO's testing range in Odisha's Balasore, shooting down a live Indian satellite target in low Earth orbit. Jointly led by India's Defense Research and Development Organization and Indian Space Research Organization, Mission Shakti was aimed at strengthening the country's overall security. However, a few days after the test, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration expressed concern over India's ASAT test, calling it a terrible thing that created 400 pieces of orbital debris and led to new dangers for astronauts aboard the International Space Station.
See, when this Mission Shakti was launched on 27th of March, soon after that, a statement by NASA said that the debris created by this particular activity does not pose any danger to the International Space Station. But in today's papers, we find that NASA has expressed serious concern about this particular activity, and which they say may damage the International Space Station. But you know, the Indian scientists, Indian defense scientists, they have discounted their claim and they have said that there is no danger. And that is very justified because, you see, at the altitude where this particular satellite was destroyed, of 200 some kilometers, the International Space Station is at a much higher level. And when you destroy a satellite in orbit, the debris can only come down. It cannot go up. So NASA's claim that it may damage the International Space Station, that appears to be too far-fetched.
NASA said it tracked about 60 pieces of debris about 10 centimeters or bigger and will continue to track such debris. NASA officials also added that as a result of the Indian test, the risk of collision with the International Space Station has increased by 44% over the last 10 days. The US Space Agency said it will continue to track 24 of the pieces about 10 centimeters or bigger in size that are traveling above the apogee of the International Space Station, but acknowledged that this risk was comparatively small and short-lived as the satellite was destroyed well below the International Space Station.
So space debris, they are very dangerous things because anything in orbit travel at a very high speed. For instance, the debris created by this destruction of this Indian satellite they travel at a speed of 28,000 kilometers per hour. It's a very extremely high speed, you know. And even if a small piece of the debris hits a satellite or anything, it will damage it. Because the inertia, the momentum depends on the velocity actually. Higher the velocity, larger the inertia, and it has much greater damaging potential. So if it hits, definitely it's a concern. But the likelihood of its hitting the International Space Station, I think, is very, very low.
The US military tracks objects in space to predict the collision risk for the International Space Station and also for satellites. They are currently tracking 23,000 objects larger than 10 centimeters. These include about 10,000 pieces of space debris, of which nearly 3,000 were created by the 2007 Chinese experiment at 800-kilometer altitude. The debris are still flying around due to lack of air pressure. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. ISRO and DRDO rejected NASA's claims of space debris caused by India's ASAT test. Scientists say the test was conducted in lower atmosphere to ensure that the debris disappeared eventually. Reacting to NASA's statement, Indian scientists said the test was done in the lower atmosphere to ensure there is no space debris. Tapan Mishra, senior advisor to the ISRO chairman, says the debris from Mission Shakti experiment will burn out in the next 6 months. According to Mishra, the test was conducted 300 kilometers in space, where the wind pressure is low but sufficient to burn the debris. The DRDO experiment was not an explosion but more like a bullet. DRDO says the test was calibrated and conducted in low Earth orbit to ensure that the debris will disappear in 45 days.
If you look at who is more responsible, it is also linked to who is having more launches. So if you look at till now, the big bulk of launches has happened by two important countries, that is America and Soviet Union or Russia. In addition to this, European Union, then Japan, then China, and then India is also a contributor. Other countries are so less because they have launched maybe 1 or 2 satellites.
According to Dr. M. Annadurai, former director of ISRO Satellite Center in Bengaluru, the problem of space debris is a wider issue as is composed of satellites and parts of launch vehicles. The difference is that while debris from a satellite will be a larger piece weighing a few tons, debris from a destroyed satellite would be smaller.
One important difference in space debris and let's say a satellite, even a dysfunctional satellite, is that in a dysfunctional satellite, I mean, you are putting it in a particular orbit, so roughly it is in the same height. Okay, so it is actually going around in a particular orbit. But if you are looking at a space debris, the space debris may go in a very eccentric orbit, so which means that its height can vary. So it can actually cause a potential threat to paths in different heights. That's one important point.
While the size and weight of the pieces are secondary, what is crucial is that these pieces move at very great speeds. In low Earth orbit, where the targeted Indian satellite is located, objects typically move at almost 8 meters per second or 28,000 kilometers per hour in order to stay in their orbits. At such speeds, even a tiny object of just about 100 grams will produce the same kind of impact on collision as a 30 kg stone traveling at about 100 kilometers per hour.
Around 60 years ago, our space exploration began, and the first satellite was launched by Soviet Union. From then on, number of countries have been launching various satellites to space and then carrying out a lot of space mission. Each of them create some amount of debris in space. You know, the satellite, once it becomes disoperational, once it stops operating, then it becomes a debris. And when you are sending it itself, for example, the heat shield or some screw might just go around in the space as a debris. These are all the things which are becoming the major bulk of space debris as of now.
According to the European Space Agency, there are about 34,000 objects of 10 centimeters or above in space, while another 90,000 objects of sizes between 1 and 10 centimeters and a further 128 million of sizes between 1 mm and 10 mm are in space.
There is some law called International Space Law. One of the principles of that is that if your satellite is becoming dysfunctional, today there is an understanding that you should deorbit and then make it enter into Earth and then burn it rather than leaving it as space debris.
Yet, considering the vastness of space, collisions even between pieces of debris not moving in any fixed orbit are extremely rare. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. Time for a short break on the program. On the other side, we'll talk about the International Space Station. Do stay with us.
वोटर वेरीफाइबल पेपर ऑडिट ट्रेल यानी वीवीपैट, ये वो मशीन है जो ईवीएम से कनेक्टेड रहती है। ये बताती है कि मतदाता ने जिसको वोट दिया है वो वोट उसी को गया है या नहीं। यानी इस मशीन के जरिए मतदाता दोहरी जांच कर सकता है। दरअसल आपके वोट डालते ही वीवीपैट मशीन की डिस्प्ले में एक पर्ची लगभग 7 सेकंड तक दिखती है, जिसमें आपके द्वारा दिए गए वोट का विवरण लिखा होता है। बाद में ये पर्ची एक बॉक्स में गिर जाती है जिसे मतदाता घर नहीं ले जा सकते। किसी विवाद की स्थिति में इन पर्चियों के जरिए वोटों की जांच दोबारा की जा सकती है। सबसे पहले वीवीपैट का इस्तेमाल 2013 में नागालैंड के चुनाव में हुआ था और इस बार के लोकसभा चुनाव में पूरे देश के मतदान केंद्रों पर वीवीपैट का इस्तेमाल किया जाएगा।
Enter the majestic forecourt of Rashtrapati Bhavan and you'll come across the Jaipur column. A gift to the Viceroy from Savai Madho Singh, the Maharaja of Jaipur, to commemorate the creation of the new capital. The 145-meter high column is crowned with 6 pointed crystal stars on a bronze lotus, and inside the stone shaft runs a steel tube which weighs a little more than 5 tons. The base of the column has text conceived by Lord Irwin and Sir Edwin Lutyens inscribed on it.
Welcome back. You're watching In Depth. According to NASA, even though India's ASAT mission was carried out in low Earth orbit, it still jeopardizes the safety of the International Space Station and those on board. NASA Chief Jim Bridenstine says the risk to the International Space Station increased 44% in just 10 days. Our next report looks at what the International Space Station is all about. The International Space Station is a large spacecraft that orbits Earth. The multi-nation laboratory has hosted a rotating international crew since November 2000. It is also the largest single structure put into space by humans. As of January 2018, 230 individuals from 18 countries have visited the International Space Station. The United States and Russia are top participating countries. Since 2nd November 2000, astronauts of different countries have occupied the International Space Station continuously. The first piece of International Space Station was launched in 1998 by a Russian rocket. In the following years, more pieces were added. 2 years later, the station was ready for astronauts. On 2nd November 2000, the first crew arrived at the space station. NASA and its partners completed the construction of the International Space Station in 2011. The space station is made of several parts called modules. The first modules had parts needed to make the space station work. Initially, astronauts also lived in these modules. Also called modes, the modules connect parts of the station to each other. Astronauts do their research in the laboratories on the space station. On the sides of the space station are solar arrays. These arrays collect energy from the sun. They turn sunlight into electricity. On the outside, robot arms are attached which help to build the space station. These arms can also move astronauts around outside and control science experiments. Airlocks on the space station are like doors. Astronauts use them to go outside on spacewalks. Docking ports on the space station are also like doors. These ports allow visiting spacecraft to connect to the space station. New crews and visitors enter the station through these docking ports. Astronauts fly to the space station on the Russian Soyuz. The crew members use the ports to move supplies onto the space station. The International Space Station is almost like a house with 5 bedrooms. It has 2 bathrooms, a gymnasium and a big bay window. 6 people can live in it.
No, International Space Station is an international laboratory in orbit, in space, where the scientists can do lot of experiments on zero gravity. You know, in zero gravity, lots of things happen which cannot be seen on Earth because we have the Earth's gravity affecting those things. So there are lots of experiments that can be done on the International Space Station because of its zero gravity environment. And you know, scientists from many countries, they visit the space station regularly and then return. So this is a very ideal place for doing some kinds of experiment which can never be done on Earth.
The space station weighs nearly 1 million pounds and is big enough to cover a football field including the end zones. It has science labs from the United States, Russia, Japan and Europe. The International Space Station includes contributions from 15 countries. American Space Agency NASA, Russia's Roscosmos and the European Space Agency are the major partners of the space station who contribute most of the funding. The other partners are the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency and the Canadian Space Agency. Astronaut time and research time on the space station is allocated to space agencies according to the money or resources like modules or robotics that they contribute.
International Space Station is a space platform. If you can think of a Volvo bus, something like 4 or 5 Volvo bus attached to each other, that's a kind of size that it has. It's around 500 kilometers above Earth, and it's going around Earth in an orbit, which is taking roughly about 90 minutes to make one orbit. From about 2001 till now, there have been always 3 people inside the space station. So it's permanently manned and womened by people for almost 20 years now.
The space station flies at an average altitude of 248 miles or 400 kilometers above Earth. It circles the globe every 90 minutes at about 17,500 minutes per hour or 28,000 kilometers per hour. In a day, the station travels about the distance it would take to go from Earth to the moon and back. Astronauts working on the space station experience 16 sunrises and sunsets each day.
No, development, as I told you, they are basically it's a platform for doing scientific experiments under zero gravity. All kinds of experiments, For instance, how humans survive in zero gravity. When you go in a satellite, you just return after 90 minutes or so. You don't know exactly how it affects. But when you stay on the International Space Station for months together, in fact, some the astronauts have spent 1 year, more than 12 months on the space station, and then you can study their physiology after they return to Earth, how they have changed, how they have been affected, because in zero gravity our bones become weaker, our length becomes less, all kinds of changes occur. So this kind of study is not possible on Earth. So the space station, it offers a platform to do different kind of physiological and scientific experiments by international community.
The space station appears as a bright moving light across the night sky. It can be seen from Earth without a telescope by night sky observers. The International Space Station will be operated through at least 2024, with partners discussing a possible extension until 2028. Thereafter, plans for the space station are not clearly laid out. It could either be deorbited or recycled for future space stations in orbit. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV. And let's now talk about India's Mission Shakti that catapulted the country into an elite league of countries with anti-satellite weapons. It is a joint program of the Defence Research and Development Organization and the Indian Space Research Organization. The United States of America, Russia and China already have the ASAT technology. This mission is aimed at strengthening India's overall security.
In the field of space, March 27, 2019 is a very special day for India. It was the day India became a space superpower in its own right. On this day, India shot down a live satellite 300 kilometers away in low Earth orbit. Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself gave the information in an address to the nation. A live satellite was the predetermined target in low Earth orbit. An anti-satellite ASAT weapon was launched to shoot it down. The entire operation of Mission Shakti took just 3 minutes. The achievement made India the 4th country to shoot down a live satellite in low Earth orbit. Until now, these capabilities were only available to America, Russia and China.
No, Mission Shakti was basically a mission aimed at developing a capability of destroying a satellite in orbit. Because it is not aimed against any country or any power. Basic idea is that if we come to know that some country is using its satellites in low orbit to spy on us, to study our maybe military activity or anything, and if we fear any threat from them or that kind of use, we can destroy that satellite. So till now only 3 countries had this capability, but Mission Shakti showed that India can also do it.
Anti-satellite missile will equip India with a new strength in terms of security and development. Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that with the new capability, India is not aimed against anyone. He said that the intent is to defend India's space assets without violating any international law or treaty. The Prime Minister said to maintain peace and security in the space sector, it is important to have a strong India. He also underlined that our strategic objective is to maintain peace and not create an environment of war. ASAT is completely an indigenous mission that has been completed with the help of ISRO and DRDO. The satellite, which was targeted by India from the ASAT missile, was present in the LEO or low Earth orbit. Low Earth orbit refers to an altitude of up to 2,000 kilometers. Most of the satellites made by scientists revolve in this orbit. Very little energy is used to send any satellite into low Earth orbit, due to which these satellites give high bandwidth and low communication latency. Most of the space stations are also installed in the LEO, with the help of which the activities of the space are monitored. LEO is used for many communication applications. Most of the telecommunication satellites are put in this orbit. The satellite, which was shot down in Mission Shakti, belonged to India. The mission was the result of hard work of ISRO and DRDO scientists that enabled India to achieve this success in space. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
So that's it from us in this edition of In Depth. You can also watch our episodes online on YouTube and Twitter and send us your feedback and suggestions. Thank you very much for your time.